Okay, so now I'll show you how to make the most delicious and not sweet at all praline. To make the praline, I will need the following components. Obviously, the nuts. I'm using almonds and hazelnuts. They are previously roasted at 140 degrees Celsius for about 25-30 minutes. As you can see, they have skin on. You can also use blanched nuts if you wish. Like this, the praline will have a clear, light color, but I prefer using the nuts with the skin on so that the praline has more flavor and a more beautiful color as well. Then I'll need a little bit of salt to enhance the flavor and balance the sweetness, and 2 types of sugar, regular, granulated sugar, and the glucose syrup over here. Glucose syrup will help me reduce the sweetness of the praline as well as to preserve its viscous texture and prevent the sugar from crystallizing over time. Like this, the texture of the praline will stay perfect within the whole period of its storage at room temperature, or in the freezer or in the fridge, as you prefer. If you don't have the glucose syrup, you can use corn syrup instead, because it is exactly the same thing, but simply of a different name. Or you can skip it and replace it with regular sugar. Like this, the praline will be slightly sweeter, but still it will have beautiful texture. You will be able to use it in the recipe without any problem. The praline is always a combination of caramel and nuts, so first I'll need to make the caramel. I'll put the glucose syrup and the sugar in the saucepan, and we'll start heating them until they melt, and then we'll continue heating until the temperature reaches about 180-185 degrees Celsius. The color of the caramel has to be amber, it has to be rather dark, but not too dark, not black, otherwise the caramel will turn bitter and the flavor of the praline will be spoiled. During caramel preparation, it is important not to mix the 2 components too vigorously. Even despite the addition of the glucose syrup, I do not recommend mixing the caramel during preparation. You can simply shake the pan a little bit, and like this, the caramel will continue cooking evenly. So I'll start by adding the glucose syrup first. Then I add the sugar. And now I'll start heating these ingredients on medium heat until they melt and start caramelizing. When the sugar and the glucose syrup melt completely and start obtaining some color, this is when you can start mixing the caramel a little bit gently to make sure the heat is distributed evenly. I'm looking for a uniform golden brown, slightly amber color. Like this, the caramel will have maximum flavor, but you can control the degree of doneness of the caramel. You can cook it longer, you can cook it shorter. For example, this color is light golden. It looks okay. The praline will work. It will have a slightly sweeter taste, and you'll feel more flavor of nuts. But I prefer cooking the caramel darker so that I have a good flavor of the caramel itself and the nuts too. So I'll continue cooking the caramel. So this is the color of the caramel I'm looking for. The temperature here is around 180-185 degrees Celsius. I do not check the temperature usually when I make caramel like this. I check the color. And it is best to check the color on something white, like on this white spatula. When you see the color starts turning amber, it is perfect. Okay, so when I have the caramel ready, I take it off the heat and we'll pour it on the silicone mat. Now I'll spread it evenly so that it cools down faster. It's enough. And then I'll put the dried vanilla parts that I was using for something else, for some other recipes. I'll put them directly on the caramel. With the heat of the caramel, they'll start releasing the natural oil, and like this, the caramel will be more flavorful, and praline itself will have more flavor. If you don't have vanilla dried, or if you don't want to use it at all, no problem. This is not a necessary component here. Now I'll leave the caramel to cool down completely at room temperature. It will take about 20 minutes, and then I will blend it together with the nuts to create the praline. After about 20 minutes at room temperature, the caramel has cooled down, it has hardened. Now it looks like this. As you can see, it unsticks from the silicone mat easily. Now I'll transfer it into a food processor. We'll add the nuts, and then we'll blend everything into a fine paste. So here I take the food processor. Please do not try to do this at home with a regular blender or with a hand blender. You will break those tools, that equipment. Please use the good quality food processor like the one I'm using, or use any other type which also has quite enough power to break the praline into fine powder and then into the fine paste. So first I'll put the caramel inside. Then I add the nuts. As you know, you can use any type of nuts in this recipe: hazelnuts, almonds, only almonds, cashews, pecans, whatever you prefer, and change the flavor of the praline like this. And finally, I'll add the sea salt to balance the sweetness. Now I'll start blending everything. First, I need to obtain a powder, and then I'll continue blending on medium speed until this mixture turns into a paste. The nuts will start warming up. We'll be releasing the natural oil, which will lubricate all ingredients and will help to turn all this into a beautiful and homogeneous paste. After a few seconds of blending, the mixture of nuts and caramelized sugar turns into powder, like this. Now I'll continue blending, and the nuts will start releasing oil, as I told you before. And like this, the praline will start turning more liquid, and it will be smoother with time. The more you blend, the smoother it will be, but you should also be careful with the temperature of the praline at this point. It should not exceed 75 degrees Celsius. If it goes above this temperature, it will clump, it will not be liquid anymore, and it will be impossible to fix this. You will not be able to add water, something like this. So be careful with the temperature. Do not overheat your praline during preparation. So after about 5 minutes of blending on medium speed, the praline is ready. I'll show you its texture. It has to be like this. It is semi-liquid now. It has some chunks of nuts and caramel. It is perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I would like to have some texture of the praline. I don't want it to be super smooth and runny. I want it to be a nice addition to the texture of the sponge, the texture of the mousse and the glaze. So this is what I'm looking for at this point. Now I'll transfer the praline into a clean container and we'll leave it at room temperature until I'm ready to use it. If you want to store it longer, you can transfer it into a container with a lid and keep it at room temperature for about 3 months without any problem.